I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.
Hello and welcome to another installment of Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor. This week, will the Federal Reserve bail out President Joe Biden and his 2024 re-election campaign? The Federal Reserve made Wall Street happy when the Summary of Economic Projections, or SEP, and Chair Jerome Powell signaled that 3 rate cuts were coming in 2024. Despite some tergiversation by Fed officials in the days following the final powwow of 2023, financial markets are ignoring the reversal commentary and focusing on the possibility on the loosening of monetary conditions. According to the CME FedWatch tool, 70% of investors anticipate a quarter-point rate cut as early as March 2024. Mainstream economists disagree with the futures market, arguing that it is more likely that the Eccles building will pull the trigger on a 25 basis point rate reduction to the benchmark Fed funds rate in the summer. Whatever the case will be, even the expectation of multiple rate cuts is enough to send Treasury yields, mortgage rates, and other interest rates lower. The US Treasury market, which had experienced intense volatility since September, sending nearly all bond yields to their highest levels in 16 years, has endured a bloodbath. The benchmark 10-year yield is now below 4% as of this recording. Much of the 22-year high interest rates inflicted pain on the US economy. Additionally, since there is a lagged effect of a rising rate crusade, the agony of higher interest rates has yet to be fully felt, something that the Federal Reserve has acknowledged in its minutes. Now that the Federal Reserve is turning dovish, this is good news for the incumbent president. Remember, the Federal Reserve is not an independent institution. It is a political tool used by Republican and Democratic leaders in both the executive branch and the lower and upper chambers. Indeed, several days before the Fed left rates unchanged and pointed to rate cuts, President Biden encouraged the central bank not to raise rates. Chair Powell and his merry men and women of policymakers heeded the president's calls. Powell had even told a group of college kids on December 1st that it would be premature to talk about rate cuts. Lo and behold, a few days later, the Fed is now planning to slash interest rates. Of course, this will certainly irk former President Donald Trump, who lambasted then Fed Chair Janet Yellen for rate hikes when he moved into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and then strong-armed Jerome Powell to cutting them to give the economy a boost. President Biden is one of the least popular presidents of all time. Nearly all polls show his approval rating is in the basement. Even as the administration went on a multi-month Bidenomics marketing tour, it has not been enough to bolster the public's view of the White House. In fact, since the summer, many surveys suggest that President Biden's policies have done more financial harm to their households.
They started off making fun of it, calling it Bidenomics. Well, guess what? It is Bidenomics. We have a lot more to do to put our plan that's already paying off. All told, we've created 14 million jobs since he took office, more than any president has created in all 4 years of a term. Wages are up more than inflation. The economy grew by 5% this last quarter. Today, the supply chains are strong.
Meanwhile, the United States Central Bank has a long history of lending support to the White House. As Liberty Nation has extensively detailed over the years, the Federal Reserve White House tag team dates back to FDR. Since then, the Fed has come to the rescue of presidents in both parties, from JFK to Lyndon Johnson to Bill Clinton, from Richard Nixon to Gerald Ford to George W. Bush. This has become the status quo in Washington. Consider what economist and historian Thomas DiLorenzo wrote years ago, quote, "Worse yet, many Americans have been conned into believing that the Fed chairman operates like the Wizard of Oz, hiding behind dark curtains, pulling levers, and pushing buttons to make the economy operate smoothly. So-called scientific socialism may have been the most absurd and destructive idea of the 20th century, but it is nevertheless the guiding ideology of central banking." It is worth discussing that if Trump were to win in 2024, would he be enjoying an economy where interest rates are coming down? Liberty Nation has posited that inflation could turn out to be a situation of the 1970s and 1980s. When it looks like the inflation beast has been vanquished, it keeps returning, much like those horrific Fast and Furious movies. This would force a central bank to either leave rates high or pull the trigger on rate hikes, something that the Fed has already noted would be a possibility. Any further tightening would likely enrage Trump, who had been a vocal critic of the Federal Reserve System as both a candidate and president. Another facet would be interesting is that if Powell's term expires during Trump's time in the White House, who would he nominate to lead the central bank? So many possibilities indeed. In the end, it shows just how powerful the Federal Reserve truly is, and yet the public seems rather indifferent to the omnipotent institution. Many people will ask, why do low interest rates need to be the de facto policy anyway? This is a worthwhile question. If the market were in charge of interest rates and not an unelected bureaucracy, rates would likely be a lot higher and remain that way for a while. But since the Federal Reserve is in charge, it is deemed that the United States economy must reside in an environment where the benchmark Fed funds rate is 1 or 2%. The reality is that the US must be in this climate because it can only function when interest rates are artificially suppressed. The US government is spending $1 trillion a year to service the national debt at a time when the policy rate is above 5%. Consumers are spending billions of dollars extra a year on their $1 trillion credit card debt. The country is drowning in IOUs, and if rates were higher, the United States would metastasize into a nation of zombies, meaning that the only thing they could afford is to service their debt. So, in a way, the Federal Reserve is not only bailing out President Biden's re-election campaign, it is also bailing out an economy swimming in an ocean of red ink. That's it for me this week. Please read my full Swamponomics column on the pages of LibertyNation.com, and be sure to check out my previous Swamponomics TV videos and interviews. Thank you. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.